What's up, guys? Crazy hair. Alright, so this was a requested video from me about how to rope solo. And there's a few different ways to rope solo. I'm going to split this up into two videos. One with rope soloing starting from the base of the route and then moving up, which you kind of tend to see more in aid climbing, which we call aid soloing. And then this video, which I'm going to start at the top, go down, and then how to climb back up, which is kind of the more common way to rope solo for people that are practicing routes in order to actual solo them a lot of the times, like you see in that movie Free Solo. Alex Honnold does the rope soloing just to prepare the moves for actually soloing it, and then other people will do it because they have no one to climb with, like me. I'll do this every now and again. I don't really like it because it takes a lot of work for a little amount of climbing, but it's a good video to talk, or a good subject to talk about. First thing I want to talk about before I dive into the video is my bomber anchor. Single bolt up there. When you do this, you actually want to make sure that you have a really solid, redundant anchor. This is just going to be my example of it. You can see the bolt is like 10 feet off the ground. It's nothing. It's not even that high. But it's just my example because everywhere else in this structure is wet, and it's actually raining outside right now. So I'm just going to talk about the basic setups on how to do this, and that's kind of all you need to know. But you do need to be confident with your anchors and understand climbing anchors is the basis of this whole setup. Okay, gear you need for rope soloing. It kind of depends on which kind of soloing you want to do. You can rope solo with the gree-gree. I've done this many times before, and I'll talk to you about how to do that at first. It's more common to use some sort of clamping system like the micro traction to rope solo, so I will talk about this. However, Petzl, who make the micro traction, this is probably the most common rope soloing device on the market. They recommend having two attachments to the rope. And I say attachments because you can use two micro tractions like I have here, or you can do other things like use a Q-bar, or a couple of other companies make clamping teeth systems like this, and so you can use a mix and match or whatever. I was doing a lot of rope soloing lately, and I was only using one, which you will see people doing, only using one, and I kind of decided to do it the more legit way, so I picked up a second one. And I'll talk you through sort of a good way to set these up apart from each other. You also want a double link sling, if anything, for a chest harness while you're using your two micro or whatever rope clamps that you got. Also, it's just a very useful tool to have. Lock-in quick draw again comes in with using two of these things. It helps have some separation between the two devices. And then I threw in an ATC and a third hand in conjunction with this because they're just good elements to have on your harness. And when you're rope soloing, you're kind of depending fully on yourself, so it makes sense to have a little bit of extra gear with you. Maybe a few extra locking carabiners and maybe a alpine drag too. Those could come in handy. Okay, so first setup with rope soloing that I'm going to talk about is using a gree-gree. This one's pretty simple, but it takes the most amount of work. I like using a gree-gree plus for this, and then I set it in top rope mode. That extra cam helps sort of keep it tight. Just stick it on the rope, clip it to your belay loop. As you climb with this device, every now and again you have to stop climbing and then pull rope up through it. Now there are times when the weight of the rope is heavy enough that it will actually start pulling or sliding through the gree-gree on its own while you climb up, but that kind of doesn't happen all the time. At least I've found that it doesn't happen all the time. I've done probably the most amount of rope soloing in my life with the gree-gree on me, and it works, just you have to pull rope in every few moves, depending on how sketched you are. Alright, so your other option is a micro traction. And for a while, I soloed with only one of these. Some people still prefer only soloing with one, but I am going to show you the more recommended way by Petzl. The way how I like to think about this, these things take a little bit of getting used to when loading the rope through, but this big hole right here, when I close this, always has to be above the little cam teeth right there. And that's how I think about it to make sure I've loaded it right. Also, so I stuck it on the rope, slide this down to my belay loop, and I'll engage the teeth, the little flick. And then the way how I test if I've loaded this right is pull up on the rope, and then it should be pretty tight. You can even sit down if you want to make sure that it's loaded up correctly. Now when it comes to climbing with this thing, you can see it's right here. This is kind of the natural state where it's at. It's always this low, but the rope will slide through as smoothly as possible. And then every now and again, especially when I just start out, I'll pull up a little bit just to make sure that it's still gripping and it's still good. And then if I fall, then it's just holding me in place. Now that's sort of the pitfall of this device. Here, I'll go a bit lower. That's sort of the pitfall of this thing is if this fails and you're kind of stuck with, falling. And so that's why Petzl doesn't recommend only using one of these devices. But you can see a lot of people for years have only used one and they've been fine. So it's kind of like a go with what you want. You can put in stopper knots every now and again, so that way if this cam does fail, it's not going to get through this knot. Okay, so now I'm going to do the actual recommended way. This is just one version that I sort of found that works for me for actually rope soloing with two micro tractions as they would recommend. So first thing I do is I set up my first micro traction right there. These devices do have a little lock on them for the teeth. Yeah, so right here you can see the teeth are engaged. And if I push the teeth up and then hold this thing down, it actually locks the teeth in place. So it could function as a pulley if you wanted to, but that's kind of a useful setup for, or a useful thing for when you're just setting this up. And then if I push down on this, whole thing engages on the rope. So for the first part of setting everything up, I like the teeth to not be engaged. So right here, this one, the teeth are not engaged. It's just flying free. Next thing I do is I pull out my locking quick draw. This could be anything you want to make out of it. And I attach the first carabiner onto my belay loop. Then I'll set up this micro traction, remembering to keep the big hole on top. And then I'll clip the other locker in there. And the idea with this, you can see, is there's separation between the two devices. Now I like to test to make sure that they're loaded right. So I'll engage the top one, pull rope through. If that stays where it's at, then I know that's loaded right. And now I can engage the bottom one and pull rope through that. And then you can see how both of them are engaged and working. Now as I climb up, this one right here is going to work its way down below. Here, I'll show you. So as I climb up, you can see how this top one works its way down to the lower one. There's nothing kind of holding it up. So what I can do is I can attach this to myself. I'll use a double length sling for that. Make it into a chest harness where I go through one arm, give it a half twist through the other. I'll throw it over. So that way it forms an X on my back. Get everything settled. And I'll just use a locking carabiner and hook that into the top carabiner of my micro traction setup. And so now, as I climb up, this chest harness will help hold this upper micro traction above me. So you can see there I am. It's all staying where it's at. And I can always tug up on this if I want, and if I fall, then I have two backing me up. So I just wanted to go through this again from a different angle to make sure everything is clear. I'm going to start with adding the first micro traction onto my belay loop. And notice how that's in a small locking carabiner because I want that one to be lower than the next one. Here I'll pull out my locking quick draw, lock that into the same belay loop. Then use the second micro traction and clip that into the top carabiner of my locking draw. There we go. That way it can have a certain amount of separation between the two. I'm going to engage the teeth on that one to make sure that that one works. Engage the teeth on the lower one, make sure that that one is working as well, which it is. And then finally I'll just clip my chest harness into the top one to keep it above the lower one. Alright guys, so that's sort of the most common techniques for rope soloing. They do actually make, well, they used to make some devices. Ren used to make something called the Soloist, and well, that's the only one I can think of right now. But there are actual devices out there for rope soloing. None of them are made anymore. If you're lucky, you could find one on eBay for like $400, but often they get bid up to like $5 or $6 or I don't know, $1,000. And so, yeah, nowadays they just don't really make rope soloing devices. And so that's where the micro traction and other protraction and whatever other devices come in to the market. I think the micro traction is kind of the most favorite one. That was my video on how to solo when you already have the rope fixed up top. It's not uncommon to fix the rope, rappel down on a gree-gree, and then rope solo your way up, which is very common in places like URA. You get that a lot. Keep in mind that the rope, if it's super icy, the micro traction won't grip. So that is something for you ice climbers out there. You got to really watch out for that. But that's if it's like coated in ice. Like dry Colorado snow doesn't really affect it too much. And then if there's ever any worry about it, then you can just go to a device you're more comfortable with, like a gree-gree. I know I was climbing this route on the Bastille called Hairstyles and Attitudes. It's a 12C, and I was just rope soloing it one day, and I rappelled down, and I was too sketched to even switch to the micro traction, so I just climbed the whole thing on a gree-gree, and I think I got some video about it. I'll show you, but it just sort of shows to go you how, or it goes to show you how rope soloing is, and it's actually a very useful skill if you want to get a lot of laps in. And I hope this video helps you out. I think next week's video will be me talking about how to rope solo from the bottom to the top of the climb, or if not next week, then I'll make that video real soon. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.